a young woman wandered into an abandoned police station, cursed by its violent past. From that moment, a vengeful spirit attached itself to her, chasing her through every dark corridor, haunting both her nights and days. Each step she took echoed with terror, each breath carrying the chill of death. Her body weakened from sleepless nights, her mind fraying under the weight of endless pursuit. Just as the ghost's cold hands reached for her, a mysterious man emerged, confronting the darkness head-on. His sudden appearance turned despair into fragile hope, opening the possibility that she might survive the nightmare, consuming her. My name is Madison, a student who preferred quiet archives over crowded parties. That evening, I followed Lucas into the abandoned police station on the west side, a place whispered about since the unsolved murders decades ago. The metal door screeched as he forced it open, releasing a stale breath of dust and rot. I adjusted my glasses, short hair brushing my cheeks, trying to ignore the dread creeping into me. Lucas lifted his camera, eager for material, while I felt like every step deeper pulled me further from safety. The hallway stretched forever. Tiles cracked, paint curling off like dead skin. A faint drip echoed in the distance, too steady to be water. When I inhaled, the air seemed frozen, cold enough that my lungs stung with each breath. We entered the interrogation chamber, a square room where the walls bore stains that no paint could hide. The lantern light caught the old mirror, but the reflection was wrong. Instead of two students, there was a third figure, blurred at first, then sharpening into a burnt form. His skin sagged like melting wax, hair tangled and drifting as if underwater. Hollow eyes streamed black tears that slid slowly down his pale face. My pulse hammered as the temperature dropped further, the glass frosting over while his figure pulled free from it. Lucas raised his camera, yet the lens only showed static. I could not move, rooted to the spot as the ghost leaned forward, his breath a white mist that snaked toward me, curling around my neck. Fear cracked my paralysis. I ran, shoes slamming against the concrete as the air split with a screech. The figure glided soundlessly after me, each glide swallowing the distance I tried to make. My glasses slipped down, but I kept running. Turning the corner, I nearly collided with Natalie, another classmate who had sworn she would wait outside. She stood clutching a notebook, her wide eyes mirroring the terror in mine. Before she could speak, chairs scraped violently across the floor, though no one touched them. A desk toppled and slammed, blocking the path back. The ghost hovered inches above the ground, arms stretching unnaturally long, fingers brushing the air as if reaching for me. Shadows bent with him, warping along the walls like living ink dragging me closer. When despair closed in, a tall man appeared at the stairwell's base. His long brown coat swept around him, his stance broad and unshaken, eyes glowing faint blue against the gloom. He raised one hand as if parting the invisible weight pressing down on me. For the first time, the ghost faltered, recoiling like smoke pulled back by wind. My chest heaved, Natalie gripping my arm so hard her nails dug into my skin. Lucas stumbled in, his camera useless, muttering a prayer under his breath. The stranger's presence filled the space, calm yet commanding. Without a word, he advanced, forcing the specter backward. The ghost hissed without sound, the walls vibrating until cracks split across the ceiling, and dust rained down on us like falling ash. The man drove the figure toward the mirror at the end of the hall. The glass convulsed, reflecting nothing but the twisting shadow. With a thunderous crack, it shattered, shards scattering across the floor in glittering fragments. The spirit dissolved into the darkness between the shards, vanishing but not gone. Silence weighed heavy, broken only by our ragged breathing. Natalie clung to me, while Lucas cursed his dead camera. The man's eyes softened as they met mine, steady and strangely protective. Then he turned and disappeared into the misted stairwell without offering a name. My body shook, nerves raw, skin clammy with the ghost's lingering chill. That night followed me long after we escaped, each shadow in my room alive with memory, reminding me I had only survived, not escaped. A young woman unknowingly entered a cursed place where a vengeful spirit bound itself to her, chasing her relentlessly through shadowed halls and into her dreams. Each step echoed with dread. Each sleepless night drained her body and mind until she became only a frail shadow of herself. The ghost grew bolder, closing in with icy hands and hollow eyes, leaving her breathless and desperate. Just when she felt the weight of death brush her skin, a mysterious man appeared. Confronting the darkness directly, his presence breaking the suffocating grip of despair and offering her a fragile thread of survival. My name is Madison, and I thought returning to my normal life would bring peace after that night in the abandoned station. I told myself it was a one-time horror, something that would fade with time. But the memory clung like smoke, following me into my classes and even my dreams. Lucas tried to laugh it off. Natalie avoided the subject entirely. Yet I carried the cold weight of it every day. That weekend, I agreed to join them at the old theater downtown, a place long closed since a fire decades ago. I wanted to believe it was harmless, just another broken building, but the silence of its charred halls had the same pulse of dread that once froze me. The seats stood empty in rows, their velvet eaten away by dust and mold. A stage curtain hung torn, half burned, and the air smelled faintly of ash. I pushed my glasses up, telling myself it was only a place. Yet when I walked past the cracked mirror in the lobby, my reflection wavered, and another face looked back. His skin was pale as melted wax, eyes blackened, wet streaks dripping down as if he still burned inside. My stomach turned, and I staggered away, bumping into Natalie, who grabbed my wrist with trembling fingers. She saw it too, her face draining of color, and the breath left us both when the lights overhead flickered, though no power remained in the building. A low groan echoed across the theater, as if the walls themselves mourned. Lucas called from the stage, his voice strained, telling us he caught something on his recorder. The words barely left his mouth before a seat flew sideways, smashing into the aisle. I froze, heart hammering, as the ghost drifted forward, his body scorched and broken, hair floating as though underwater. He stretched his arms, and the sound of his breath filled the entire hall, cold mist spilling through the rows of chairs. My lungs ached, my vision blurred, and I tried to move, but my legs locked beneath me. Natalie screamed, but it was cut short when a shadow swept across us, dragging the temperature even lower. The figure towered above the stage now, mouth opening in a silent roar, pulling the curtains upward like they obeyed his will. I stumbled toward the exit, Lucas shouting for me to run faster, but every door slammed shut before I reached it. My chest tightened and panic clawed at my throat. Just as his hand reached for me, a man stepped out from the far aisle. I knew him from before, the tall stranger in the brown coat, his presence as steady as stone. His eyes glowed faint blue in the dark, and he lifted his arm with calm authority. The air shifted, forcing the spirit backward, its form twitching as if resisting a storm. I collapsed against the wall, watching through blurred vision as he walked slowly, each step echoing with defiance. The battle between them rattled the building. Seats tore from their frames, glass shattered from windows long sealed, and the ghost screamed without sound, his body distorting in fury. The man pressed forward, never faltering, until the spirit retreated into the cracked mirror in the lobby. The glass rippled like water, then sealed, leaving only a web of fractures behind. Silence returned heavy and suffocating, broken by my ragged breaths and Natalie's sobs. Lucas sat hunched over, clutching his recorder that now played nothing but static. The stranger looked at me once more, his eyes softening before he disappeared into the darkness. We left the theater shaken, but I knew the haunting was far from finished. Every reflection since then feels wrong, as though the mirror hides more than it reveals, and the shadow of that night follows me into every corner of my life. My name is Rachel, and I never thought an ordinary evening would turn into something I could never explain. Jason convinced me to help him document an old courthouse on the edge of town, a place left behind after decades of silence. We carried cameras and notebooks, laughing nervously as if the weight of the building's past could be shrugged off with casual talk, though the echo of our steps already made me feel uneasy. The walls still carried portraits of judges and officers, their faces faded, but their gazes sharp under layers of dust. Another classmate, Sarah, came along to handle lighting, her cheerful voice bouncing through the empty chambers like a fragile shield against the silence. I tried to stay calm, but the air felt too still, heavy in a way that pressed against my chest, making each breath feel borrowed. Jason kept insisting this was the perfect site for research. Yet I noticed his eyes shift quickly whenever we passed a broken door or cracked window. We spread out through the corridors, Sarah's light flickering on old filing cabinets while Jason scribbled in his journal. I felt something different in one of the rooms, a chamber with a high ceiling and broken blinds swaying without wind. My skin prickled as if invisible threads brushed against me, pulling me toward the center. The floor creaked louder than anywhere else, as if the building wanted to announce I had stepped somewhere forbidden. I tried to push it off, whispering that it was just old wood, but then I heard another sound that didn't belong. A low dragging across the floor, slow and deliberate, coming closer even though the room was empty. Sarah called my name from the hallway, and her voice cracked like she too sensed something strange. When I turned, the corners of the chamber seemed darker than they should have been, as if shadows were thicker than walls. The portraits on the walls tilted slightly, frames rattling though no tremor shook the ground. Jason came in quickly, eyes darting as he asked if I had touched anything. His face paled when the dragging sound returned, circling us now, moving faster. Sarah's light blinked twice, then steadied, illuminating a figure near the far wall. It wasn't whole, its edges blurred like smoke, but its eyes were unmistakable, hollow yet fixed on me alone. Every step backward felt heavier, as if the air was turning solid. Jason pulled me closer, his grip firm, trying to shield me even though I could tell he was trembling. Sarah whispered that we needed to leave, but the figure shifted, blocking the exit, its shape stretching unnaturally across the floor. My heart pounded so loud I thought it would shatter the silence itself. Yet the sound of dragging never stopped, circling, closing in. The figure leaned forward, arms lengthening, and I felt a cold rush along my skin, not touching yet already inside me. My knees weakened, and I thought I would collapse, but then another presence entered. A man I had never seen before stood in the doorway, calm but firm, his voice low as if speaking to something he had known before. He didn't carry anything, no tools or weapons, just a steady strength that pushed against the suffocating dread. The shadows recoiled slightly, pulling back, though their gaze still clung to me. His eyes never left the figure, but his hand reached back, steadying me, grounding me in a way I had lost the moment I stepped inside. Sarah's breathing steadied, as if she too felt a barrier form around us, something intangible but strong. Jason stared, frozen between disbelief and relief, as the air began to lighten just enough for us to move again. The figure lingered, its form twitching against the dim light, unwilling to fully vanish yet unable to advance. The man spoke again, calm but unyielding, until finally the dragging sound ceased. Silence filled the chamber, not comfortable but survivable, and with a nod he urged us toward the hall. My legs moved without thinking, carrying me out into the open night, lungs aching as if I had surfaced from underwater. Even outside, the courthouse loomed with its broken windows staring down at us, and I knew what lived inside was not finished. The presence had chosen me once, and the chill still clung to my skin like an invisible mark. Jason and Sarah spoke in fragments, trying to explain, but I heard none of it. My thoughts circled only around that figure, its hollow eyes, and the man who had pulled me back when I thought I had no strength left. I walked away with the certainty that places remember, and sometimes they refuse to let go. The night ended, but the fear lingered, curling inside like smoke that refuses to fade. Even now, I cannot step past shadows without feeling them stretch toward me, reminding me of what waits where silence is too deep. My name is Rachel, and there are nights when I wish I had said no to Jason's endless curiosity. This time he wanted to explore the abandoned theater downtown, a place once filled with velvet curtains and golden lights, but now stripped to its bones. Sarah tagged along again, insisting she would keep us sane with her chatter, though I could tell even she felt uneasy the moment we stepped through the rusted doors. The stage was still there, half collapsed, and rows of broken seats faced a silence that seemed heavier than dust. I tried to laugh at how dramatic it looked, but my voice echoed too sharply, like something else was mocking me. Jason shone his flashlight across the balcony, pointing out strange markings along the railing that didn't match the architecture. Sarah nudged me, whispering that it felt like someone had been here recently, though the place was locked tight from the outside. We walked deeper, the floorboards groaning as if remembering the weight of an audience long gone. I felt drawn toward the dressing rooms, The mirrors still lined against the walls, their glass cracked but reflecting more than they should. My own reflection lagged, moving a fraction slower than me, and I froze, unsure if it was just the poor light. Jason called for me to keep up, but I could not take my eyes off the figure in the mirror, its head tilted even though I stood still. Sarah joined me, her flashlight bouncing over the mirrors, and for a second I saw not one, but 3 of myself staring back. One of them blinked when I hadn't, and my throat tightened as if something pressed against it. The air grew cold, sharp, and the smell of mildew gave way to something metallic, stale, yet suffocating. Jason stepped between us, trying to rationalize what we saw, but his words fell apart when the glass cracked loudly on its own. The sound carried through the hall, followed by a low hum that made my bones ache. From the shattered mirror, a figure slipped forward, stretched and broken like it had been waiting behind the glass for years. It moved toward me, its body twitching as if adjusting to the air outside, its gaze fixed only on mine. Every step back felt heavier, the theater shrinking around me, walls pressing close while Sarah and Jason tried to pull me away. The figure's arm reached out, not fast but inevitable, and the hum turned into a deep vibration that shook the wooden beams above us. Dust rained down, and I thought the ceiling would collapse, but I could not move, my legs stiff as stone. Jason shouted for me to run, yet I could barely breathe, the shadow already brushing against my arm. I thought this was the moment everything would end, when another figure appeared from the side corridor. He moved quickly, but not in panic, his steps steady, his presence stronger than the noise around us. He placed himself between me and the thing from the mirror, his voice low but firm, a sound that seemed to cut through the vibration. The figure recoiled, shivering like smoke against wind, its form bending back toward the broken glass. Sarah gasped, clutching my arm as if she could anchor me to the ground, and Jason stared at the stranger with disbelief. The man never looked away from the shadow, his focus unshaken, until the hum weakened and the mirror shivered violently. With one last flicker, the figure collapsed back into its fractured reflection, leaving the glass dull and lifeless again. Silence followed, too sharp to trust, but my lungs finally released a breath I had been holding for what felt like forever. The stranger turned to me briefly, his eyes calm but unreadable, before nodding toward the exit. We left quickly, stepping back into the cool night where the theater loomed silently behind us. Sarah's hands were still shaking. Jason scribbled notes, though his face was pale, and I felt a weight clinging to my chest. The stranger had vanished the moment we reached the street, leaving no trace except the memory of his presence. I knew the theater would never let go of what it held inside, and that whatever looked at me from the mirror had not truly gone. Even now, when I pass glass at night, I hesitate before meeting my own reflection. I know what I saw was more than imagination, and I know the figure has not forgotten me. My name is Rachel, and I used to think I had a good sense of where I belonged. I studied history, spent hours in the archives, and usually found comfort in dusty books rather than crowded gatherings. When Jason, a classmate, suggested we explore an abandoned church outside town for his project, I said yes without much thought. The place had been boarded up for decades, hidden under vines and silence, and part of me wanted to see if the rumors about strange lights inside were true. I convinced myself it was nothing more than crumbling wood and cold air. The drive there was longer than I expected, the road narrowing into gravel, with trees bending over us like a canopy. In the back seat, Daniel and Sarah argued about whether the church once hosted secret ceremonies, while I kept staring at the outline of the building as it appeared in the distance. Its roof sagged, the bell tower cracked, and windows glared hollow against the fading light. I felt uneasy stepping out, though I told myself it was just the chill. Jason pushed the door open, and the sound echoed like a groan through the empty nave. Inside smelled of mildew and damp stone. Dust floated in shafts of light that cut through broken stained glass. The pews were warped, some overturned, as though people had rushed out long ago. I lingered near the entrance, notebook in hand, while the others spread out with flashlights. Jason moved toward the altar. Daniel checked the balcony. Sarah disappeared into a side hallway. My chest tightened at the thought of being left alone, yet I didn't call them back. The silence felt too thick, too heavy. I walked down the central aisle, and every step echoed in a way that didn't match my pace. I paused, listening, and the sound died instantly. My throat went dry. I turned, expecting to see Daniel or Sarah behind me, but no one was there. The air pressed against my skin like damp fabric. My pulse climbed, and I realized the light from the doorway had dimmed though the sun hadn't set. I backed toward the entrance, telling myself to stay calm, when I heard a soft dragging noise from the balcony above. Daniel's voice called my name, shaky, but when I glanced up, I saw no movement. Instead, something leaned over the edge, pale and shapeless, with eyes too dark to belong to anything alive. My knees nearly gave out as I stumbled back. Jason appeared from the altar, his face pale, asking what happened. But before I could speak, the air shifted and the figure above slipped into shadow. Sarah ran out of the hallway, swearing she had heard footsteps following her. None of us admitted what we had truly seen, though the fear was already in our eyes. Jason tried to lead us out, but the heavy doors resisted, the wood swollen as if something pressed against it from the other side. Sarah pulled at the handle until her hands trembled. Daniel kicked against the frame, and I stood frozen, realizing we were trapped. Then the whispering began, soft at first, like a chant under the floorboards. It grew louder until it filled the room, a chorus without mouths. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would tear out of my chest. Jason pulled me toward the aisle, telling me to keep moving. We ran, though the shadows stretched too long, too close. Sarah clutched Daniel's arm, both of them glancing back as if expecting the figure to lunge. My body shook, every step heavy, but Jason's grip anchored me. At the far end of the church, a side door burst open with a crack, revealing the night air beyond. None of us cared how it happened. We only ran through it. Outside, the air felt sharp, real, like I had broken the surface of water after being held under too long. We didn't stop until we reached the car, all four of us silent, afraid to name what we had seen. Jason kept looking back toward the church as though expecting the shadows to spill out after us. When we finally drove away, the building shrank behind the trees, but the weight in my chest didn't lift. That night, I lay awake, every creak of my house sounding like the dragging from the balcony. I knew what I saw wasn't just light or dust, and the whispers still pressed against the back of my mind. I told myself I would never return, but a part of me knew the church wasn't finished with us. My name is Rachel, and some nights I regret ever agreeing to join that research group. I thought helping Jason with his project would be just another late evening surrounded by old papers and coffee. Nothing out of the ordinary. Instead, it led me to the abandoned boarding school that sat on the edge of town, a building people crossed the street to avoid. Jason said its history was perfect for our study. Daniel called it superstition, and Sarah just shrugged. I kept quiet, though the idea of walking those dark halls made my stomach twist. The place stood with broken windows and vines crawling up the brick. The front steps sagged under our weight, and the double doors gave way with a reluctant creak. Inside smelled of dust, mold, and something faintly metallic. Light from our flashlights cut narrow paths through the stale air. Desks still lined the classrooms, toppled and scattered, chalk frozen on boards as though the students had fled mid-lesson. The air was too still, too heavy, and every sound we made felt magnified. Jason went straight to the office to dig for records. Sarah walked upstairs, and Daniel muttered about finding the auditorium. I followed the central hallway, pretending I wasn't afraid, though my skin prickled as if someone's gaze pressed against my back. I entered a classroom with peeling wallpaper and overturned chairs. My breath fogged faintly, though it wasn't that cold. I turned in a slow circle, realizing my footsteps didn't sound like they belonged to me alone. A low shuffle came from the hallway, dragging and deliberate. I froze, then stepped back toward the doorway. The hall stretched long and empty, but shadows hung too thick in the corners. My pulse climbed, and I whispered Jason's name, though the silence swallowed it whole. Then a faint voice rose, not from any of my friends, but from deeper in the building, calling my name in a strained, uneven tone. Sarah came down the stairs pale, saying she heard someone walking beside her, even when the steps stopped. Daniel returned from the auditorium, his face tight, insisting we leave. Jason refused, clutching a stack of records, until the lights flickered and something like a figure stood at the far end of the hall. It was taller than any of us, its outline bent in ways that made no sense, its head tilted as if bones had snapped the wrong way. I couldn't move, my body locked in place. The figure slid closer without sound, shadows peeling off the walls around it. Jason grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the door. Sarah clung to Daniel, both running ahead of us. The heavy air thickened, pressing into my lungs, and the floor seemed to shift under my steps. I nearly fell, but Jason steadied me, urging me forward. Behind us, the sound grew louder, no longer shuffling but pounding, like every wall and door vibrated with its rhythm. The exit seemed impossibly far, the hallway stretching longer than before, but Daniel forced the doors open with a violent shove. Cold air rushed in, snapping the weight from my chest, and we all stumbled into the night. We collapsed against the car, none of us speaking, each trying to process what we had seen. Jason finally whispered that the figure looked like something that had been stitched together from shadows. Sarah said she felt its breath on her neck before she even saw it, and Daniel stared at the school as if it might follow us out. I didn't admit that I heard it call my name, that the echo of it still rang in my ears. When we drove away, the building disappeared behind trees, but the unease clung to me. That night I couldn't sleep, every creak in my house making my heart jump. I realized some places don't want their silence broken, and once you hear your name spoken by something you can't see, you never really forget it. My name is Rachel, and I thought spending a weekend helping Jason document another forgotten place would be harmless. We had been to quiet cemeteries, ruined barns, even a crumbling mill by the river, but this time, Daniel insisted on visiting the old train depot at the edge of town. Sarah tagged along too, more curious than cautious. I told myself it was just another building, though the idea of walking through a place that once pulsed with travelers but now stood hollow gave me an uneasy pull in my stomach. The depot loomed with cracked windows and weeds clawing through the platform. A single iron lamp still clung to its post, bending low as if tired of standing. Inside, benches leaned on their sides, ticket windows broken, and the faint smell of oil lingered. Dust floated thick in the air, catching in the weak beams from our flashlights. Jason wandered off toward the office to look for schedules. Sarah pressed her phone to record echoes of the waiting hall, and Daniel nudged me toward the stairwell leading to the upper floor. I told him I'd rather stay near the main platform, though every inch of it felt too quiet. As I walked the length of the hall, the sound of footsteps trailed a few beats behind mine. I thought it was Sarah, but when I turned, no one was there. The benches seemed closer than before, their shadows stretching too far across the floor. A cold draft swept past my shoulder, and I swore I heard a voice, low and stretched, whispering from the far end of the hall. My chest tightened, and I tried to call for Jason, but my throat locked halfway. The stillness pressed harder until the whisper formed my name, thin and deliberate. Sarah came rushing back, her face pale, saying someone touched her sleeve though she had been alone. Daniel appeared from the stairwell, unsettled, claiming the upstairs was filled with old coats hanging in rows, swaying though the air was still. Jason refused to leave, papers clutched in his hand, until a shadow peeled itself from the wall across the hall. Its form was wrong, tall and bent, as though its joints shifted too loosely. The empty sockets where its eyes should have been seemed locked on me. My legs refused to move, my whole body trembling against the wooden floorboards. Jason dropped the records and yanked me toward the platform. Sarah clung to Daniel's arm as they moved fast ahead of us. The figure slid closer without a sound, its limbs brushing across the benches as if dragging them slightly out of place. The lights above flickered, bulbs swelling brighter, then snapping into darkness. The pounding in my ears drowned every thought, but Jason's grip pulled me through it, his hand steady and firm when mine felt like ice. I stumbled on the cracked tiles, but he caught me, forcing me forward. The exit door felt impossibly heavy until Daniel threw his shoulder against it, forcing it open. The air outside hit me sharp and cold, clearing the weight from my lungs. We spilled out onto the platform, gasping, the night suddenly alive with crickets and distant cars, normal sounds I had never been so grateful to hear. Behind us, the depot stood silent, windows blank as if nothing had stirred inside. None of us spoke right away. Jason stared down at his empty hands, the papers gone, Sarah rubbed her arms, shivering though the night wasn't that cold, and Daniel kept glancing back, jaw tight, ready to move again if anything followed. I stayed pressed against the railing, my heart pounding, hearing the echo of that voice still circling my thoughts. Later that night, lying awake, I realized something that unsettled me more than the shadow itself. The voice hadn't called anyone else's name. It had called mine alone. And now I couldn't shake the fear that the silence in my own house wasn't really silence at all.